Did you know that there are 3 ways that most reading programs teach reading that are not in alignment with the science? Stay tuned to hear what those 3 things are and the one way that takes only 30 seconds to teach just about anyone how to read that is in alignment with the science. And topping out number 1, the most popular way that reading programs will try to teach kids how to read is through the 3 cueing systems. And I'm not going to get too much into that right now, but suffice it to say that the leading tactic that these types of programs guide us to teach our students when they see an unknown word is to look at the picture, think about the context of the sentence, and only thirdly, think about the printed word in front of them. And even then, it's usually just what's the first letter. So you can see that this is relying on reasoning, higher level skills. Sounds like that might be good, but actually science has really been very clear that that is the antithesis of how the brain learns to read. In fact, we know the child needs to attend to the print, read the sounds left to right in order to start to crack the code, to decode, and then become a good reader. We've actually known this for over 50 years. If you want to get a timeline of research that shows some of the heavy hitters from the scientific community documenting this principle that we need to teach the written code. Our written language is a code for sounds. We need to teach it. And relying on context, looking at the picture can be a distraction. They're only a supporting player. They're not the numero uno. So check out this timeline that I created with hyperlinks to go to these really influential documents, consensus reports, meta-analyses, etc., over the last 50 plus years. A smaller subset of programs that are being used in the US and Canada and Australia involve the teaching of phonics. And this is a good thing. This is in alignment with what we know about the science. Kids have to be taught the code in order to crack it. But there are different approaches to how to attack an unfamiliar word under this umbrella term phonics. So our number 2 strategy that's really not tightly aligned with the science would be called using analytic phonics or relying on word families. Now, the very influential U.S. National Reading Panel report in 2000 determined that the difference between analytic, using a word family phonics versus synthetic phonics, which we'll talk about in a second, was not clear, and that both were superior to the 3 cueing or any embedded phonics approach where there was not a systematic approach to teaching how to crack the code, and certainly not by relying on context or the picture. But since then, there have been some studies that have shown that a synthetic approach, which we'll talk about in a minute, is superior to an analytic approach. And I will share some citations for that. When we use an analytic approach, we are relying on the ending rhyme, like at in fat, cat, sat, mat, or ip in sip or skip, to teach how to put the sounds together. So the teacher might ask the student to read the first sound or the onset, as in s, in sat, and then read the rhyme or the ending unit at, and then put them together, s, at. You can see this was what the PBS program Between the Lions thought would be a good way to teach kids how to read.
And on your right, sir, at. Blend on, dudes.
And indeed, it's likely much better than the three cueing approach that relies more on context and less on cracking the code. But we know now that a synthetic approach where each sound is attacked individually, each phoneme is read left to right, as in s, a, t, as opposed to s, at, that approach will get better outcomes on average. And again, I will share some citations for that. And then under this umbrella concept of synthetic phonics, there are a couple different ways to teach kids how to attack an unknown word. When they see the word sat, what do you prompt them to do? And so that leads us to our third tactic that is quite common under the phonics umbrella, but is not, again, tightly aligned with the latest science. And that is what I call the sound word approach. It is a segmented approach. So you encourage a child who sees sat to say s, a, t, and then say, what word? Sat. That sounds like traditional phonics, right? And there's some value in having children learn to segment, segment those sounds or those phonemes so that they see how the sound that they hear connects to those symbols on the page. But many kids, particularly those who are weaker in phonological processing and maybe perhaps working memory, find that this process of segmented phonics or segmented decoding, sound, word, is hard for them. And many of you, I bet, have seen this with your students. So they say at, and then they say turtle, because all they can remember is that last thing that came out, and the t in sat. You can see that the PBS show Sesame Street back in the day thought this would be a good approach to teaching decoding. It's almost the speeded up approach to decoding.
And you go, and you go, man, yeah.
So we've covered the three strategies that are mainstream, but not really tightly aligned with science. Number one, the three cueing is really out of whack and has got to go. And many states in the US and other countries have gotten to this point that they're even outlawing it as a strategy because the science is so robust. The other two, the word families or analytic approach to attacking an unfamiliar word and the sound word approach, are still quite well respected and often what our phonics programs recommend, but they're not as efficient and effective as the strategy that I'm about to share with you. Here at Reading Simplified, we call it the blend as you read decoding strategy. Some folks call it continuous or successive blending. A well-known research study in 2020 called it connected phonation. Regardless of what you call it, the big idea is that it's quick to teach and kids pick it up quickly, and then it works with almost everyone. So for those kids who have those issues, blending isolated segmented sounds that they've heard, at what word? This is the trick. So with the blend as you read or continuous blending strategy, rather than having this child say each sound in a segmented fashion, what we simply do is ask them to put the sounds together continuously. So here for sat, we would ask, what's that first sound? S. But we wouldn't stop there. We'd want them to put it together with the ah. What do you have next? Ah, put those together. Sa. And then they produce the last sound, t, and the word is sat. That's right. It's a subtle distinction, and it might seem as a mature reader that it's not that big a deal, but I have seen in clinical experience with struggling readers that this makes a profound difference. And you can see, for instance, what a couple other of our Reading Simplified members have discovered when they employed this simple little blend as you read trick. So when you have a student encountering a word, don't let them say each sound separately, s, a, t, and then put the sound together, but rather have them put the sounds together continuously, sat, sat. And you can do the same thing with a longer word. Friend, they can put the friend. Even if it's a slightly tricky word with that unusual spelling for they can still do this blend as you read strategy. Maybe you need to point out that the IE is in that word, and then they'll successfully blend it. But don't just take my word for it. There have been numerous studies that have shown that this blend as you read strategy is more effective than the segmented approach for decoding. In the 80s, there were a couple of studies, and then recently, the very influential Linnea Airy and her colleagues, Lindad Gonzalez Frey, did a nice study comparing the sound word approach, that Sesame Street approach, versus the connected phonation or continuous blend as you read approach. And the blend as you read approach came out on top. In fact, they noted that they were surprised how quickly the students could learn in that condition. And indeed, that's what we find here at Reading Simplified when we teach this strategy. So, have you gotten the gist? There are 3 approaches that are not in the tightest alignment with the science, but one strategy is likely going to give you the biggest bang for your buck. We call it blend as you read. Go out, find a student who is either a beginning or struggling reader. Try this strategy with them and let us know what you found. This is just one of the essential strategies we teach here at Reading Simplified. And if you want to learn more about our full system, check out the links below.